We're back talking more Madden 22 in today's video. Now, what I wanted to do today was compare the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC version versus the new consoles, the Xbox Series X/S and the PS5, because I've been getting tons of questions every single day, or I'm just seeing people confused about what changes are for which generation, which changes are coming to both generations of console, and which ones are exclusive to the newer consoles. And seeing as a lot of people don't have the newer consoles yet, this is something that I think we need to talk about, because a lot of people seem to think that all of the changes for Madden 22 are only going to be on the new consoles, and that's simply not true. While there are some things that are exclusive to the new consoles, the far majority of the changes coming to the game this year are actually going to be represented on both generations of consoles. So if you do not have a new console yet, or you're just planning to kind of stick with the older generation for another year, you're still going to get a lot of the changes, but let's talk about what those are. Now, if you're new to the channel and you don't want to miss out on any of the other upcoming Madden 22 videos, news, or updates, make sure to subscribe, click the bell icon so that you stay notified and you don't miss any of these uploads when they go live. We're going to have more gameplay footage coming very soon. I should get some exclusive footage at some point very soon as well to show off to you guys. So again, if you don't want to miss that, make sure the notification bell is on. So let's start with gameplay. Now, most of the gameplay changes for the game are going to be represented on both generations of console. However, the games play completely different, so some of the changes might not be an exact one-to-one. For example, the player movement on the newer consoles was completely redone, and if you played Madden 21, you already know this. The player movement was a little bit slower, a little bit sluggish, more realistic because they're tracking the actual player movement in real life now via next-gen stats. However, they did tighten it up a little bit for Madden 22. They made it a little bit better. The momentum, the acceleration is respected more. You really feel it with super fast guys like Tyreek Hill. However, the older generations of consoles still have a little bit more of the robotic movement, the stop and go stuff where you can change direction really fast. So those are obviously the two biggest differences in the gameplay. But in terms of the other gameplay enhancements or improvements, they're going to mostly be represented on both consoles. This includes the better tackling, the newer tackle animations, the limiting of some of the multiplayer catches, meaning when you go one-on-one for like an aggressive catch with a big receiver versus a smaller defensive back, we know in the years they would trigger a lot of those two-man animations, and the DB would, sometimes even being much shorter than the wide receiver would win those interactions a lot more often. They've significantly reduced those. That's going to be represented on both generations of console. They've also done away with multi-user or two-man interaction catches for rack catches, meaning when you're out in front and you're trying to catch it in stride and keep going. They've eliminated the two-man animations there and in some other areas as well. Again, this is on both consoles. They also made a ton of playbook changes. There's a bunch of new formations and plays coming to the game. I think over 300 new plays at the start of the year. Supposedly they're going to keep updating these throughout the year. However, they didn't do that in Madden 21, and they said they would do it, so take it with a grain of salt. But at launch of the game, there's going to be a lot of new formations, a lot of new stuff to dive in terms of playbooks, and that will be represented on both the old generation and the new generation. Now, the main thing about gameplay and the entire game in general that is exclusive to the new consoles, meaning PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X/S, is the dynamic game day stuff. This is by far the biggest thing that is exclusive to the new consoles. It's one of the bigger things for the game this year. That includes the more lifelike crowds, the better sideline animations and interactions, the momentum, which has been added to the game, where now there's a momentum bar that swings back and forth based on, successful plays, interceptions, sacks, whatever the case may be. The momentum swings back and forth. And each team has a momentum kind of X factor in the game that if you get your momentum to a certain point, your team kind of gets a little bit of a boost, and it could be certain things varying game to game. And then to go along with this is also home field advantage, which every home team has their own specific X factor for their home stadium that is unique to where they play. So when you're playing in Seattle, the crowd noise is going to be more of an effect on the away team if you have momentum in your favor. If you're playing in Denver, you're going to notice that the away team is going to fatigue faster because of the altitude. So all of that stuff is next gen only: momentum, home field advantage, and dynamic game day. The other thing about gameplay that is exclusive to next gen only is the next gen star-driven AI. This is going to be more of a thing for the offline player than the online player, but anything that's being pulled from next gen stats is going to only be on the new consoles because that is a technology and hardware that is, you know, just next gen only. I don't know if it's because the systems can handle it. I don't know the logistics of it. I just know that anything next gen stats related is only going to be on next gen. Now, the star-driven AI that is pulled from this basically means that the computer players and the AI will play more like their real life counterparts. So this is kind of a thing that's a little bit bigger, I would say, for like the franchise mode crowd, because you're playing against the computer week to week and you want them to feel different. So the Ravens will run more pistol and run the ball more, and they're going to use a lot more of the plays that they would use in real life. Whereas the Bills, for example, have been very pass heavy as of late. So they're going to show that in their game planning. They're going to use the formations and the play style that they use more so in real life. And this can be updated throughout the year. So once you get like halfway through the year, if teams are maybe playing a little different, they can pull the next gen data, put it into the game, and the AI players will adjust to that. They'll also adjust more in game to like the superstar players and the X factors to try to limit them and things of that nature. So that is a next gen only feature as well, but it's more so, I would say, offline, because if you're an online player, you're not really as worried about the AI as much. Now let's go to franchise mode, which is the area of the game that got by far the most improvements this year, which is kind of weird to say because we haven't been able to say that for a very long time. The far majority of the franchise mode changes are going to be present on both generations of console. Pretty much all of them are, and I don't know why people keep suggesting that it's only on the new consoles. I think people maybe are just misunderstood, but most of the changes are coming to both. That includes the new coaching staff management with the skill trees. That's on both generations of console. The new scouting system overhaul that's going to be updated into the game in September. That's on both generations of console. The new franchise hub that kind of gives you a little bit more info and surfaces all the stuff to you a little bit better. It's more at your fingertips. It's a little bit more of a clean design, easier to navigate. You've got the new league tab and the new media tab and all the stuff that comes along with the hub. That's on both generations of console. The new season engine, which is an upgraded version of the scenario engine, and this is actually one of the places I thought they made the most progress. They actually made it pretty decent, whereas the old scenario engine was really bad. This comes with, you know, cutscenes and cinematics. You've got, you know, press conferences, meetings with the GM, meetings with coaches. You've got meetings in the locker room, all different types of things that could play out in different scenarios that you have to use to manage your team and, you know, for game planning for your future opponents. All of that is going to be on both generations of console as well. You also have the new fatigue and health management for your team that carries throughout the season, where you kind of monitor how they practice and things of that nature so that you limit injury risk and you have your players more ready to go, especially later in the season as they start to wear down. That's on both generations of console as well. You also have the new weekly game planning overhaul interface, or whatever you want to call it, where you're game planning for your opponents with different adjustments. That is going to be on both generations of console as well. The one aspect of the weekly game planning that is exclusive to the new consoles is just the integration of the next gen stats data into the weekly game planning. So for the old consoles, you still get all of the weekly game planning stuff, you just don't get as detailed of the stat breakdown. So for example, on the older consoles, you might see the player's rushing yards, whereas on the new consoles, you'll see his rushing yards to the left, his rushing yards to the right, up the middle. You get a little bit more of a detailed breakdown on the new consoles. On the older one, it's a little bit more of a basic breakdown, but the game planning as a whole is still represented on both. You also get all the other logic improvements like trade logic, progression and regression, the new draft class generator improvements where they're going to have more X factor players that you can draft, and they're going to be higher up in the draft, whereas in the past it was hard to kind of find or even have a lot of those good players in each draft. All of those little enhancements to those little things that are kind of running in the back end, that's all going to be represented on both generations of console as well. The other thing that we just talked about, the star-driven AI, I'm mentioning that here because I do feel that this is a bigger thing for franchise mode players. We talked about that's only on the new consoles because it's being pulled from next gen stats data, but everything else for franchise is going to be the same on both. Face of the franchise, literally everything about this mode will be the same on both generations of console. That include the new story, which has more road to the draft stuff. They did away with kind of like the sappy, weird, made-for-TV movie, corny story. They did away with that, and they just did something a little bit more basic and kind of true to the football fan, just kind of getting ready for the draft. All the stuff you're doing up until the draft, you know, to make the NFL team. The new player progression system that's going to be a little bit more in depth to kind of sculpting your player archetype and making him more unique to yourself, along with the unified progression between the yard for leveling up your player. Again, all of this stuff is going to be the same on both. The season engine, which is also being used in Face of the Franchise, going to be the same on both generations of console as well. And while we're talking about the Face of the Franchise and the yard unified progression, I want to touch on this because a lot of people seem kind of confused about this. They seem to think that you have to play both modes. That's not the case. You can play just Face of the Franchise if you want, or if you're a yard guy, you can play just the yard if you want. The thing is, these are the only two modes in the game where your player is the mode. You're the center of the mode with your created player. So rather than having to create two separate players and level up two separate players, you just create one player and you can use that same player in both modes if you choose to. So really what it does is it saves you a lot of time if you're someone that wants to play both modes, because let's say you've been playing Face of the Franchise for a few weeks and you've got a player that's really nicely leveled up. Well, if you jump over to the yard and want to try that out, you still have that same player. You're not starting from zero. And now if you play the yard for a little bit and you get some more progression to your player there, when you jump back over to Face of the Franchise, that progression will still exist. So basically, if you want to play both, it just saves you time instead of having to level up two separate players. If you only want to play one or the other, there's really no added benefit. You're just still getting the same player either way. So there's no downside to it. It's really just a plus if you like to play both of the modes. Ultimate Team. Now, they haven't talked a ton about Ultimate Team yet. They usually don't until late in the year, but Ultimate Team typically doesn't really get many upgrades, if at all. There's no new game modes or anything like that. The only thing we know so far about Ultimate Team, which are the main changes that they briefly touched on, were that you're going to be able to actually change your X factors and I believe abilities at halftime on your players. So this is definitely like the newest thing for that mode, because with Ultimate Team, you kind of build your team and your players out and you can kind of put whatever abilities you want on your players. It's more of like a personalized thing. So if you're in a game and your opponent came at you with some different abilities on their players that you weren't expecting, well, if you have these like backup abilities on your players, you can use the halftime adjustments feature that's in the game now to actually adjust your abilities on your players so you can try to counter what your opponent is doing. That is going to be on both generations of console because it's basically just abilities and X factors. That's something that's already on both generations of console. The one thing for Ultimate Team that will be on the new consoles only is they're adding next gen stat tracking on your actual players or MUT cards, which is something that's just been asked about for I can't tell you how many years now. Like, finally MUT guys got one thing they've been asking for, which is stat tracking, but because it's being pulled from next gen stat data, I believe that's only going to be a next gen only feature because of that. So with Ultimate Team, the two little minimal upgrades that you're going to get for it, one of them is going to be for both, which is the ability changing at halftime. The stat tracking will just be on the new consoles. The yard, literally everything about the yard is the same on both generations of console. That includes the new campaign mode, that includes the new ranked leaderboard system that they're integrating, the new fields and places to play, the new gear for your players, the new live events, the ability to recruit players to your team. All this stuff is going to be on both generations. There's nothing here that's exclusive to the new consoles. Same for Superstar KO. Everything is going to be the same on both. The main thing being added here is team play, and a lot of people were confused when I talked about this a few days ago. They said, what is team play? Team play basically means that me and two other people can get on a team and go against three other people. So I can be the QB, one of my buddies can be the wide receiver, excuse me, the other one could be the running back, and then on defense, you know, you could have two cornerbacks and a linebacker, whatever the case. You're basically, instead of playing 1-on-1, you're playing 2-on-2 or 3-on-3, and this was in Ultimate Team for some years now, but you were not able to do this with the regular teams like Packers versus the Niners, for example. Well, inside Superstar KO this year, they have integrated the regular team play into the game where I can be the Saints versus the Falcons, me and two of my buddies versus you and two of your buddies. This is going to be on both generations of console as well. So just to kind of sum it all up, I have it on the screen here. These are all of the main talking points, the main features. You can see on the left, we have both consoles. We have on the right, the things that are only exclusive to the new consoles. So yes, there are some big things here that are only exclusive for the newer consoles, but the far majority of the game as a whole, the new things are going to be represented on both. So, you know, if one of these things for the new consoles is kind of a make or break thing for you, then now you know what's represented on both. You know what's represented on just the new console. So now you can make a more informed decision of whether you want the game or not. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, as always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.